Welcome back to Tales from Our Dark Past. Today we're uncovering London's most dangerous attractions and tourist traps, exposing the hidden risks lurking beneath the surface of this iconic city. And shockingly, whilst researching this, there was so much that I didn't want to miss out that I had to split this video into 2 parts. This is part 1, and I hope you'll join us for part 2, which will follow shortly. With that said, let's dive into London's most dangerous tourist attractions. London is one of the most popular tourist destinations in the world, boasting on average a whopping 30 million visitors each year. But how many of those visitors would actually return? And how many had their trips ruined by something unexpected? First on our list is Covent Garden. Covent Garden is a much-loved part of London for tourists and Brits alike. It has quirky shops, a beautiful market, and a buzzing atmosphere, drawing in approximately 44 million visitors each year. But beware, while you're shopping and enjoying yourself, thieves are hard at work, pickpocketing distracted tourists. Pickpockets have operated in London for centuries, and it's a problem that isn't going anywhere fast. In fact, it's only been getting worse. Reports of pickpocketing in London more than doubled between 2021 and 2022, with a massive 7,899 incidents reported. Covent Garden has some wonderful and talented street performers, which can draw in large crowds of happy and intrigued visitors. But it's often moments like this when pickpockets can strike, targeting the crowd while they're distracted by the performance. The busy shops and crowded streets also help the thieves go undetected. You probably won't even notice you've been robbed until you next go to check your phone or go to reach for your wallet, and then you realise someone's had it. It's best to keep your valuables secured and never put your phone or wallet on the table while you're in restaurants and cafes, especially if you're sat on the street, as it's just too easy for thieves to snatch it. And I think in these busy tourist spots, you should always just assume that a thief is watching. They're always looking and always waiting for an opportunity to snatch your precious belongings. Don't make it easy for them. Unfortunately, trips and falls also aren't uncommon here. The paths are busy, and Covent Garden's famous cobbled streets aren't always the easiest to walk on. As well as the fabulous shopping opportunities, Covent Garden also has 13 theatres and over 60 pubs and bars to explore. Everyone's trying to enjoy themselves and have a good time, but accidents can happen, especially when we're having fun and maybe not paying attention, or if we've been drinking. One poor guy was out celebrating his stag do back in 2015 when he fell down a Covent Garden pub staircase. He had to be put in an induced coma, and his wedding, which was due to take place in 6 weeks' time, nearly had to be postponed. Thankfully, he had reached a stage of recovery where it could go ahead as planned. I hope the happy couple are still doing well today. But this unfortunately isn't an isolated incident. Over the decades, many have suffered serious injuries or even lost their lives from falling down steps and staircases, tripping or falling in and outside many trendy London bars and restaurants. Have fun and enjoy yourself, but take it slowly. Give your eyes time to take in your surroundings when moving about. I know everybody seems to be in a big hurry in London, but they'll just have to wait. Don't let the crowds make you feel pressured into walking faster than you're comfortable with. Many of London's buildings are old, and steps might be steeper and wonkier than they first appear, so it's worth slowing down a little. There's also another issue that you might notice while you're at London's Covent Garden, but that's featured later in this list. Next up is the London Underground. The London Underground is the city's famous tube train system. It's huge and stretches across 6 zones. The tube opened in 1863 and is the world's oldest system. It carries nearly 5 million passengers throughout London every single day. But just like our previous tourist destination, the London Underground is also a huge, huge pickpocketing hotspot, with thousands of London's reported incidents taking place on the Underground every year. Stay alert and aware of your surroundings when using the London Underground, as pickpockets aren't the most dangerous thing to look out for here. The warnings and yellow lines are there for a reason, and I can't stress the importance of sticking to them strongly enough. Always stand well back from the platform's edge. Incoming trains whiz into the station at an astonishing speed, and standing too close can be extremely dangerous. Hordes of busy crowds pile onto the platform at peak times, and accidents do happen, resulting in people ending up on the tracks. Passengers often cram themselves onto packed-out trains, getting bags, coats, and even body parts trapped in the closing doors. It's best to stand well back when waiting, and if a train looks overly full, simply wait for the next one. They're normally only a few minutes away and can be significantly less busy. You'll also be one of the first on and have more of a chance of getting a seat. And in the summer months, overheating can be a real problem. The temperature on the London Underground can reach over 29 degrees Celsius. And the stations, trains and tunnels can feel extremely hot and stuffy, with the busy crowds and train fumes only making it worse. This results in many people fainting. It's another reason to stand well back from the platform's edge, especially if you start to feel dizzy or faint. If you begin to feel unwell, take yourself away to safety and ask for help from a member of staff or a passerby, and they'll give you assistance and get medical help if required. It can also be a very good idea to pack a bottle of water and a small hand fan for when travelling on the London Underground, especially during the hotter months or at peak times when it's at its busiest. Another potential hazard on the London Underground is that many stations have very tall escalators and staircases. They might seem ridiculously high for those who aren't used to them, and they can be a bit intimidating. Follow all signage, as one side of the escalator is used for those wishing to stand still and the other is used for those wanting to walk up in a hurry. I'd obviously advise standing and holding onto the handrail, especially if you're not good with heights. Accidents do happen, and falls down these escalators can result in serious injuries. There's even been a rise in falls since the lockdowns, as more people were afraid to touch the handrails. So if you're worried about the potential risk of germs, it's possibly better to just wash your hands after, rather than trying to avoid them altogether. There's also a chance that you might be unlucky enough to experience technical delays whilst travelling on the Underground. Trains need to be stopped for a wide range of reasons, and it happens surprisingly often. Signal failures, breakdowns, trespassers or hazards on the tracks, repairs, driver changes, and many other reasons can result in trains coming to a stop and being held in the tunnels. In one incident in 2023, hundreds of passengers were stuck on a cold, dark train for nearly 4 hours after overhead cables suffered damage, although luckily waits of that length aren't as common. And the last thing that I'll mention on the London Underground in this video which tourists might need to be aware of, is that not all of the London Underground is easily accessible. If you suffer with a disability, especially mobility issues, I'd recommend planning your routes and journeys ahead of time. I've added a link in the description where you can find help with that if you're worried it might be an issue during your trip. Next on our list is rickshaws. You'll find these guys in pretty much all of the popular London tourist spots, especially places like Leicester Square, Soho and Covent Garden. You'll most likely be dodging them in the street as they line entire pavements in the busiest areas and have been described as a plague on central London. Many are dressed up in over-the-top decorations like colourful fluffy seats, flashy lights and blasting out loud music to grab your attention. But don't be fooled into thinking that you're in for a fun ride, because these rickshaw drivers have just the worst reputation for ripping people off, especially tourists. There's estimated to be around 900 rickshaws operating in London, and there are no regulations currently in place to ensure that they are operating to a high or even acceptable standard. Basically, anyone can buy a rickshaw and start offering strangers a lift, which just doesn't sound safe in itself. It's terrifying to think that for years pedicab drivers have gone unchecked, with nothing in place to ensure the public's safety. They aren't required to have a licence, insurance, or criminal record checks. So you can't be sure if the rickshaw you're getting into is even safe to be on the road, and you don't know if the driver is safe to be around or their level of knowledge on road safety. The rickshaw drivers are notorious for overcharging unsuspecting tourists who are unfortunate enough to enter their vehicles, often demanding huge, eye-watering sums of money. When I say they overcharge, I don't just mean by 10, 20 or even £50. I mean big money. In some cases, victims have reported demands of £500 or £600 just for a short 10-minute ride. And fares of £200 or £300 seem to be the norm, with the highest reported fare being an incredible £820. Rickshaw drivers can set their own prices and have been reported to become aggressive and intimidating to those who try to question the large sums they're being charged, resulting in many feeling like they have no choice but to pay them what they're demanding. One unfortunate man even suffered horrendous injuries when he was struck by a rickshaw whilst out with his girlfriend in Covent Garden. He said it just came out of nowhere and smashed him face on, knocking him out and causing him severe head and facial injuries. Then the rickshaw driver just pedalled away, but not before allegedly spitting at a member of the public before fleeing the scene in this awful hit-and-run case. On the 28th of March 2024, Parliament backed a new bill to introduce stricter regulations and a new licensing system for London's pedicabs. After more than a decade of campaigning, they'll soon all need a licence to operate, which will be handled by Transport for London. So there is hope for the future that this quirky and potentially fun alternative way to get around London might be safe one day. But for now, or at least until the new bill has had time to take effect, I'd suggest avoiding the rickshaws altogether. The next most dangerous place on our list is the River Thames. The famous River Thames and its embankments are lined with street entertainers and some of London's most popular attractions and landmarks, drawing in millions of visitors each year. But the famous river can be far more dangerous than it might appear. Firstly, the River Thames is not a river that you want to fall into. As we discussed on one of our previous videos, the River Thames has a dark past filled with horrors. And although it's been massively cleaned up over the last century or so, it is still being used as an overflow for raw, untreated sewage today, with millions of tons of waste flooding into the famous river every year. As well as the disgustingly dirty water, the River Thames reaches a depth of up to 20 metres and has strong, deadly undercurrents. There's hidden dangers on and below the surface, and the water is freezing cold. So cold that it can cause your body to go into shock if you fall in, making it very difficult to get yourself out and to safety. Tragically, around 30 people end up in the River Thames waters every year. Don't take your safety for granted around the River Thames. Be careful taking selfies and photos by the river's edge. One poor tourist back in 2017 went through an awful ordeal when they were trying to take a photo of the Cutty Sark. As he tried to take the photo, he slipped and fell over the railing into the river's water below. Thankfully, he managed to climb onto a ledge and was rescued a short time later. But it shows just how quickly things can go wrong. You might also want to try to resist the temptation to walk along the river's foreshore. You may notice that there are steps leading down to the River Thames, and many think that it's a good idea to go down them to take a closer look. But be warned, these steps are extremely slippery, old and poorly maintained. People have slipped down them and fallen into the river's murky water below. Even at low tide, when you might be tempted to go down and walk along the foreshore, it can often be full of dangerous hazards like broken glass, rising tides, and other nasties. So unless you really have a reason to be down there, it's not really worth the risk. Thames River cruises and boat tours are also very popular in London, and the majority of the time they are completely safe and brilliant fun. But there have been incidents in the past. In one terrifying accident back in 2013, a famous London tour company, London Duck Tours, who are known for their amphibious vehicles, suffered a serious fire on board. In September 2013, 30 excited passengers boarded the tour bus, including young children and a pregnant woman. They set off for their fun and informative tour by driving through London. Then they'd move on to the exciting finale by driving the unusual tour bus straight into the River Thames, taking in the rest of the sights from the river's waters. As the boat neared the Houses of Parliament, the day went from fun to disaster in a matter of seconds, when a fire broke out in the front of the vehicle and quickly began to spread. Thick black smoke was billowing out, flames were getting out of control, and the vehicle began to sink. Terrified passengers started piling towards the rear end of the boat, scrambling to get away from the flames and the deadly smoke. The tour guide and the driver told the panicked tourists to put on life jackets and evacuate. The scenes were chaotic, with people clinging onto the sides and jumping into the water. Luckily, other nearby boats and rescue workers managed to get everyone to safety, with 3 people needing hospital treatment for smoke inhalation. But as I said, these professional boat tours are usually very safe in the majority of times. The big problems come when people start taking out their own boats or hiring them, expecting a peaceful and fun cruise down the river, and then finding themselves completely unprepared, inexperienced and ill-equipped to deal with the dangerous River Thames. Many have needed rescuing or assistance after losing control of their boats or getting into other difficulties, turning an otherwise lovely day out into a potentially dangerous situation. Next, it's London buses. Many people want to get photos with them or of them, but be very careful. These famous London buses are responsible for far more deaths than you may realise. There were 63 reported injuries or deaths involving London buses in just the last 3 months of 2023 alone. And accidents involving pedestrians unfortunately aren't uncommon. Just a few months ago, there was an incident at Victoria bus station. A 56-year-old woman was hit by a double-decker bus and tragically died at the scene. Shockingly, just a few years prior, another woman lost her life at the same station. In another harrowing accident back in 2013, a Spanish tourist and her 2 children were hit by a bus as they tried to cross at Charing Cross Road. It was reported that they may have looked the wrong way before crossing the street. Tragically, the woman passed away and her 2 children suffered serious injuries. So please, if you take anything from this video, please let it be this. Take London's busy roads seriously. You'll find plenty of zebra crossings and traffic lights all over London. These are the safest places to cross the streets. Always wait for the green man and never attempt to cross after the light turns red. You'll notice that large crowds often waltz across the roads, ignoring the lights, seemingly oblivious to the traffic. But don't be tempted just to follow the crowd. Stop, look, and wait until it's safe. I've added a link to the London Fire Brigade's road safety leaflet in the description, and I'd strongly recommend you check it out before you visit. Next up is air pollution. Another thing that might impact your trip and possibly prevent you from having the best time in London is the air pollution. In 2021, research showed that nearly 400,000 asthma attacks had been triggered by London's toxic air, and that around 1,000 hospitalisations a year are due to asthma and other serious lung conditions. For those of you with asthma or other conditions, London is pretty bad for air pollution, so please don't travel without your necessary medication. And in the unlikely event that you forget it, it might be best to prioritise getting some before you go exploring, because the bad air might take you by surprise if you're not expecting it. London has been and currently is taking steps to try to reduce the problem. The newly introduced ULEZ scheme was brought in 2019 to try to improve the air quality in the city. And although it did suffer an initial backlash and is seemingly hated by Londoners, hopefully it'll be worth it in the long run, so that this won't be such a problem for future generations. And the final entry on this video is Boris Bikes. Another familiar sight on London's busy roads are Boris Bikes, and chances are you'll be seeing a lot of them. There are 12,000 Boris Bikes in London, with 800 docking stations for the public to make use of. And they've become a popular way to get around London since they were introduced in 2010. The bikes were originally sponsored by Barclays, which is why the bikes used to be blue. But since Santander took over the sponsorship in 2015, their colour changed to red, and the bike's official name became Santander Cycles. But they've always really been known by their nickname, Boris Bikes. This is because they were introduced as London's cycle hire scheme by Boris Johnson, who was the Mayor of London at the time. But be warned, these bikes may appear like a good option, but they might not be as ideal as they seem, and can potentially even be very dangerous when on London's hectic roads. Visitors can hire the bikes using an app from one of the many docking stations, with prices for a day pass claiming to start at around £3. But people seem to end up paying much, much more than this, with payment guidelines said to be unclear and confusing. Riders are venting on TripAdvisor with countless scathing reviews like, "Charged for bikes we couldn't get, twice. We tried 2 docking stations, I put my card into first and nothing happened. Another person warned me that the machine was broken, not giving out the code. At that point, I'd been charged for nearly 3 bikes. But my daughter really wanted to bike, so I decided to try again. We walked a few blocks to another docking station and the same thing happened. I'm out at least £10, hopefully not more, and a lot of disappointment. And another that reads, "The cycle scheme is nothing more than a scam. This scheme is a scam. Do not use. They will charge you £300 when their docking station doesn't lock your bike up properly, allowing someone else to come along later and steal it. You won't even know that you have done anything wrong until they charge you the money, and you have no way of disputing the charges because apparently it's your fault their docking stations don't work. Also, their app is notoriously bad and doesn't work at all. This is just a disastrous scheme all around." And there's another that reads, "Big fat scam. If you're happy to maybe lose £300, then go ahead and use these bikes. Got 2 bikes out yesterday to ride through Victoria Park and docked the bikes, which cost £3.30 as we only used them for about 20 minutes. Today, I've got a pending charge for an additional £77.55. I called up my bank who tell me they can't raise a ticket until the money has left my account. So I call up Santander Cycles to find out what's going on. Then I get told by someone called Mike that the bike was not docked incorrectly, which they were. We checked and we made sure. And until someone docks the bike back in, I'll be charged £50 every day up until £300 is gone. And if someone eventually does dock the bike in, I'll be refunded apart from the £77.55. They cannot track the bikes, which is ridiculous. So I went to the place where I docked the bike and it wasn't there. I've seen how many other people this has happened to as well, so it's clearly a massive scam by TfL and the people who operate the bikes. Customers have also complained about how busy the docking stations are and how there aren't always spaces available. One review reads, "Waste of time. No spaces available at any docking stations in the city after 9 a.m, or returning a bike to Waterloo after 8 p.m. It'd be far less stressful and much quicker to walk. A pointless service when Santander does not monitor or clear full docking stations. Would rate 0 if I could. The app is not even accurate. Took a ride to the nearest point to park it. It was showing 21 available spaces. No slot was left and I could not park. Went to the ones close by and the same thing. I had to go back home to park it and walk back. As a result, I got in super late to work. Capacity issues and awful app. Biking in for a business meeting only to have to visit 6 separate docking stations to drop off my bike, doubling my journey time. Not only do they have capacity issues, the app is also really misleading. It sent me to 2 separate docking stations without available spaces, further wasting my time. Really disappointed and let down. If you're considering using the Boris Bikes, it's important to note that these hire bikes aren't supplied with helmets either, nor are there any helmets available for hire. In the UK, helmets are not a legal requirement, and even for children, it's up to their parents to decide if they want them to wear a helmet or not. The decision not to enforce helmet wearing seems largely due to not wanting to discourage cycling, as studies show that countries who make it a legal requirement have less rates of cyclists. Let me know in the comments if this is something that you agree with or not. I found interesting points on either side of the argument, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this. The Highway Code states that you should wear a cycle helmet that conforms to current regulations, is the correct size, and is securely fastened. And a 2016 study led by an Australian university found that wearing a cycle helmet reduces the risk of serious head injury by almost 70% and fatal head injury by nearly 65% when it assessed data it collected from 64,000 cyclists from around the world. It's said that across London, around 38 cyclists or pedestrians are killed or seriously injured in an average week. The first fatality on a Boris bike occurred just 3 years after they were introduced, when a 20-year-old woman was hit by a lorry as she cycled on one of London's specially designed safe cycle routes. Then another death happened just a couple of years later in 2015, when a 30-year-old woman was hit by a truck near Victoria Station. There's also been hundreds of incidents resulting in slight or serious injuries since the cycle scheme was introduced. Some junctions and hotspots are even well known for being extra dangerous. I've added a link where you can find information on these, as well as Transport for London's Cycle Safety Guide in the description of this video. If you're planning on cycling during your visit to London, I'd recommend you check them out. That's part 1 of our list for London's most dangerous tourist attractions. If you're still here, thank you for watching this far. I hope that you'll join us soon for part 2. It'd be great if you could like this video, and subscribing to the channel would be really appreciated.